Greetings, fellow Homo sapiens. I'm here today with the phenomenal and exceptional Rohan Rajadhyaksha. He is a composer, producer, probably the best keyboard player I've ever seen, or one of the best, or definitely in that. And
Wow.
just an unbelievably gifted musician. Am I missing anything from your job title? Your general person title, job title, career title, whatever.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess it's expanding forever. For now.
Yeah. Well, we'll retroactively put in whatever we have to, whatever we discover. Rohan, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm really excited to have you on. As I sort of just said in the little intro there, you're like one of the best keyboard players I've ever seen. The beginning of the podcast is always like, hey, this whoever I'm speaking to, I gotta shout them out. Like I've never seen anyone be able to play so well like Rhodes without the pedal, with no sustain pedal. And I remember something you always told me, which was like, if you play without a sustain pedal, you can commit to your voicings better. I tried it out, and I'm nowhere near as good as you are at it. But it's always just such a pleasure and joy to watch you play.
Wow, thank you. Not quite sure what to say to that, but
it's
thanks.
okay. You don't.
I wouldn't consider myself one of the best in anything, I would say, but I've been super lucky from when I was young, and I think thanks to having the right sort of family and having the right sort of background and environment, I've been able to be cognizant of that. So things like the pedal thing, a teacher of mine taught me that when I was super young, and it was more like I was too young to know what a pedal was, and I just didn't have it. So and the internet wasn't so much of a thing, and I was certainly not on there, and I had no clue. So I went maybe a decade playing piano with no idea that the pedal existed.
Oh, that explains a lot in terms of how confidently you and like the thing is, like on something like on an organ, obviously there is no pedal, or it's different types of pedals, like not relating to sustain.
Yeah.
But like on instruments like the Rhodes, and even like a piano, whatever, e-piano, whatever the case may be, like having the sustain pedal there is something that like I as a player, to whatever extent that I can play, I just so desperately need to have it. And watching you play, and it like I've recorded you on a couple of projects, and there's no it doesn't sound like you don't have a pedal. That's the thing. Like it's just it's amazing. You're pulling it off.
Wow, thanks. Yeah, it's something I don't think about. I mean, now I think about it more than I ever did before, since people like yourself pointed it out, and I've had it pointed out a couple of times over the last 20 years. But not more than that. So it doesn't really occur to me. It's a different feeling. I haven't quite articulated what the difference is yet. The voicing things, that's one of the things. But so many better piano players than I voice stuff much better than me with a pedal, without a pedal. It doesn't matter, right? So I think there might be a distinction there, but. For me, it helps me shut off another mechanical side of the performance and just focus in on the intent really hard. So it takes away the pressure of like, the thing with the pedal is you have to be sure about when you want to be percussive, when you want to be sustained and ambient, and there are two distinctly different feelings. And while you're reacting sometimes, for me, because I didn't have a pedal growing up, it's not something that came so naturally to me. Like I learned that along the way about how to use it on time with a rhythm, and how to, when I'm playing an acoustic piano, for example, I still don't have that really down for recordings where I can hear myself not knowing when the pedal should come off, or which subdivision in the bar the pedal should come on and come off to serve the song the best. There's obviously, you can do it mechanically on the one and the whatever, but there are these little things that serve the performance, and you don't really know as an audience. You can't tell. You don't listen for that. It's not something that occurs to you at all. But yeah, that's just one more kind of chaos factor that I remove from my performance sometimes, especially when I'm trying to come up with a part.
Yeah.
Then when I've come up with it, I can think about how to perform it. Okay, cool. It would be nice if I stepped down the pedal for this section and let it go for this section and was more percussive for this, blah, blah, blah. But when I'm first reacting, I think it's easier for me to just let my fingers do the thing while the rest of me is just listening. I'm not very well coordinated.
That's a really interesting insight, and it's a really great word that you used, intent. That brings it into focus for me. I mean, for anybody that has any experience playing a keyboard, I think that that word really helps, and that's quite a good insight. I'm trying to figure out now where to begin in terms of explaining all that you've been involved in and all that you do. And there's a lot that I don't know, and I'm glad I didn't research because I want to find out in real time as I'm talking to you on this podcast. But I'll start with the first time I ever saw you perform, or first like heard of you as a guy in this scene, because we only really met and spoke and for the first time was when we collaborated on Short Round's album.
Yeah.
And so before that, like I knew of you as a person, but I'd never spoken to you. And the first time I kind of saw you perform was with Spud in the Box. And it was at a show at Blue Frog. It was a show that was all about the history of like independent music in Bombay and or India. I can't remember. And there was like a documentary to go along with it.
It was called Standing By, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah.
I think Red Bull did it. Red Bull and OML, if I'm not wrong. It was so long ago now.
Yeah, it was in like second
that
last,
was a fun show.
Second last year of Blue Frog, I think. Second last year or last year, something like that. But I mean, that's a cool thing to be involved in. And I mean, is there anything we can say sort of generally in relating to that documentary about what that documentary says about the sort of development of, you know, what we would call the indie scene, the scene that's sort of parallel to the Bollywood in Bombay, or not?
Well, that's an interesting question. I haven't thought about that night or that documentary for a while. I watched it back then.
Not to put you on the spot.
No, that's all right. Yeah. Well, the indie scene thing, I think it's a very difficult thing for me to speak about because it's something that you know, it's just, we define it as something that's the alternative to Bollywood or the alternative to the mainstream.
True.
But there's so much regional music, there's so much folk music, there's so much stuff out there that for some reason isn't counted or isn't taken into account as part of that alternative for some, you know, and it only is kind of English, Hindi, suburban, non-Bollywood, you know. So that's a difficult one. The documentary itself was, I think, kind of chronicling a few popular artists that were not in the mainstream over the last few decades or whatever. And for Spud, the band that I was in back then, it was a fun way to kind of collaborate with a bunch of our friends. If I'm not wrong, we called Tejas on for a song.
I do remember that, yeah.
We called Uday from Indiscreet on for a song. We called Vasudha on for a song, if I'm not wrong. Now, I don't remember. We called Young Raj on for a song. We called Monica on for a song. So yeah, it was just our friends and we wanted to cover... the idea was OML and Red Bull came to us, I think, and asked us if we'd be up for doing a show like this and paying homage to a bunch of the artists that were in the documentary. So we said, hell yeah, those guys are cool and they've written some cool songs. So we picked our favorite ones and we looked around and thought, okay, cool, who would be cool to come in and sing and kind of perform and take on these songs and put them in a fresh light. So we did some rearrangements and we jammed it out. And yeah, that was kind of it on that end. On the indie scene end, like I said, it's a bit difficult to really sum up or even look at. There's so much I'm not aware of. Yeah. You know, there's so much music that's going on that it just doesn't get to me.
Yep, I'm in the same way.
You know, it just doesn't reach me yet. It hasn't reached me yet. And not that I've been so actively seeking it out over the last decade, but it's difficult. It's a difficult one to pin down and even say these are the constraints or define it in any way.
Interesting. There's something you mentioned about the folk music, which is like as soon as you mentioned it, I mean, I kind of immediately recognized that it's true. It reminds me of a lot of things. I was just literally, involved in a Facebook comment thread. Somebody talking about like what are some obscure ideas or opinions that you believe in, and I had written something about. This might seem unrelated at first, but I'd written one of the best things we can do to make better systems for our world and for our society is to repair and nourish the relationship between people that live in big cities and the people that live in rural communities, villages, and towns that are connected to those cities. And this idea,
absolutely,
yeah, and this idea that because there's this urban-rural divide is something that I've noticed in my life exists across the world. Like it's a problem. It's a situation that creates many issues across society, and it exists all over the world. It's a common issue. And it's funny to, not funny, but it's interesting to tie that into music, because you made a really valid point about we're over here defining ourselves as the alternative, doing what we do, but there's all this folk music. And another thing that makes me think of that's kind of related is like when I first came over here, like as a Canadian-born Indian, we are like very we're almost incentivized to sort of wear our culture on our sleeve, right? Mm-hmm. So now I never came over here with the intent. Like I just kind of came over here because of a family crisis, and I accidentally ended up meeting all you lovely people. But I remember pretty early on that I don't know if this is the same about the other major metros. But like, and I think we may have briefly spoken about this, but like within the indie scene, at least in Bombay, there's a reluctance to do too much of like a homage or a throwback to any of these cultural traditions. This is just a perception. Maybe these artists, a lot of them exist and they're awesome, and I haven't heard them, just like you were saying. But there was like a reluctance, at least among my immediate group of friends. They were like, why would you be interested in that? Like, we want to just put out an indie rock record. And fair enough, obviously, right? Like, you make the kind of record that speaks to you. But, like, to contrast that with, say, like, the visual artists that we have in our creative communities here, like, our visual artists are a lot more willing to combine aspects of traditional culture and really, like, remodel it and combine it with Western ideas into a different...
Absolutely.
But whereas with the music scene here, and again, at least in Bombay, I think probably it's a little bit different in other metros. We really try and do like indie style music or pop music or rock music, and maybe the exception to that is like hip hop sometimes, where like a cool like old Hindi song gets sampled or something. But even that, it's like it's Bollywood. That's just something that kind of came to my mind while you were making your point. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that?
It's a very interesting point. The visual thing, I guess I've thought of that before, but not for a long time. I don't know why that is. It might have something to do with education, exposure, things that seem cool when you're young.
Yeah.
I think when we were young, or when I was young, Bollywood was transitioning, or the music in film, Indian film, popular music was transitioning kind of to a more westernized form generally anyway. And it was taking from that. And for me personally, this is a different thing for me and maybe for other people. But for me, I remember when I was young having this conversation with my dad and kind of being like, man, you play me a lot of these songs and a lot of them are cool, but none of them seem to have any chords. And it took me a long time to figure out why that is, and the fact that Indian tradition has a whole different thing, and it has it doesn't really consider harmony. It's more like modal, and it's more melodic and rhythmic storytelling.
Oh, absolutely. I have a similar type of experience in the Indian community back in St. John's. We would, specifically in the temple, the Hindu community, all the kids would go every Sunday, sort of like church. We sort of adapted to that. And so, all the kids in the community that could play any instrument, if there was a function, then, the aunties and uncles would say, you should do a program. And so some auntie would decide to get us to all sing a song. together or perform a song. And so anybody that played any instrument would be asked to just bring their instrument one Sunday to temple and like to practice so that we could do this performance. And so we're performing some, some bhajan or some other type of song. And, somebody shows up with a flute, somebody shows up with a guitar, somebody shows up with a Casio, somebody shows up with a violin. And the only thing any of us can do, and then we're also like kids, right? Like we're not even like, we're barely teenagers. Some of us are younger. We just picked up the flute in band at school or whatever. And none of us certainly had the compositional chops to retrofit chords and stuff onto these songs in a way that would make any kind of sense. And so we just all found ourselves on all these instruments just playing the melody in unison with everyone else who's singing.
That's quite a sound.
Yeah,
right there.
it is. And so, but it wasn't until I started studying harmony. Like harmony was a revelation to me when I started studying it in the 11th grade. I took an AP music theory class, which was a big influence in my life. And like just the notion of harmony was such a revelation. And then, I kind of went back and realized, now that I know this information about harmony and arrangement of harmony specifically, like our traditional Indian music doesn't have this. And I mean, off the top of my head, the harmonic tradition that the world has inherited from, say, Western classical music, particularly like a guy like Bach, however I'm supposed to say that. That is, I don't know I can't think of another part of the world that has like a very rich harmonic tradition. Lots of really strong melodic and rhythmic traditions. Can you think of any off the top of your head?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Yeah, I think European that's the only one. That's the one that pops to mind.
They went in hard on the harmony.
They went in hard, yeah.
And
that was their thing.
Then when that mixed with sort of the later styles like in America, then we got jazz and all kinds of
bluegrass
stuff.
And Americana,
all that kind of stuff. So that's quite cool. But yeah, so traditional music, there's a reluctance to jump in. I think part of it might be that it is hard to fuse those things in a way that's tasteful and not corny, right?
Yeah, I think it takes a deep understanding of both sides.
Yep, correct.
And it takes a strong storytelling instinct to know what feels right, even if it doesn't quite fit technically or traditionally. To try new things and to kind of go deeper on both sides and try new balances between the two. It takes a willingness to explore, takes a willingness to fail.
Yep, absolutely.
And takes a deep love for both sides, or else why would you do it?
Yes, true. Yeah, like it has to be motivated out of something sincere. Otherwise, it's just a sort of a masturbatory exercise.
Exactly.
And it goes back to what I was saying about sometimes when we're raised abroad, we are almost incentivized from a number of directions to sort of overtly wear our culture on our sleeves. And I think a lot of people like myself, I was a little primed for it because I've come here on and off my whole life, but I do see a lot of people, foreign-born Indians, who, when they come over here, are kind of surprised when, aspects of culture that they have been sort of immersed in the West, Indian culture that they've been immersed in the West, and people, their hipster friends over here are just like, I don't. What are you talking about? Why are you talking about this? Like, let's go have a beer or something. So that's that's interesting.
I think people seem to be definitely because if you grow up there, I guess there's a nostalgia for the traditions and the things you left and the things you might be missing out on,
and identity as well. A way to define.
While here stuff moves on.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Yeah. So that stuff is interesting. So it's hard to do in a way that's doesn't sound forced. That guy, what is his name? Sid Sriram. Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah. Yeah.
He's got onto something, it seems.
He's amazing.
The first few times, I've only heard him a handful of times. Mally was showing me some of his stuff, but he's onto some shit. Like, that's some crazy shit, what he's doing with...
I think it's like... I think he's... The thing with him is he's been studying it for a long time, since he was super young, the Carnatic tradition.
Yep.
And I think he's lived in the States for a long time as well, studied at Berkeley. And I think he's just like, I've performed with him a couple of times over last year or a couple of years ago now. Fuck, time has passed quickly.
Time is not a thing.
I've lost complete track.
Time doesn't exist.
Time is not a thing. Yeah. But yeah, the thing I came away from that is like, I think he's just a very honest guy. Like at least what it comes across to me. He seems like he wears his heart on his sleeve when he's performing, and he's channeling something real and something that's tangible. You know, there's a strong sense of intent between every note, every cadence. There's a song of his, I forget the name now, but he starts it by repeating this phrase, "How could you forget?" And he repeats it and plays with the melody and goes up and goes down. And he's telling the story with the melody and the phrasing and the silence in between. And the phrase itself, the lyrics themselves are just an anchor that keep repeating.
Yeah.
Until it gets to a point and then the song moves on and changes to something else. But he, I think, understands the traditions of a couple of these things really well, is a student of that, and kind of knows how to weave them into the storytelling and channel them at the right time. So it all feels honest. It doesn't feel, disengaging. It doesn't feel weird or jarring, or doesn't feel like, oh, I know what you did there. That feeling doesn't happen. You're just lost in it because the intent is so strong.
Yeah.
He's drawing you into the expression.
Yeah.
And then he can take it wherever he wants.
Yeah. You hit on too many good points for me to keep track of. He's, like you said, he's got a firm footing in both traditions, and that translates in the authenticity of what he delivers.
Yep.
The thing that you keep saying that I find really interesting is this concept of storytelling, and I am getting the sense that you mean storytelling more in a broader sense than just, hey, like here's a narrative that I've written down in lyrics. So can you elaborate on how you conceptualize storytelling through just sound without verbs or verbiage or linguistic, whatever, insert correct terminology?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. That's something I've been thinking more and more about. Maybe that's why it keeps coming up today. It's something I'm like kind of studying, so to say, like on my free time as much as I can, just reading up about it, watching videos on YouTube and tutorials and stuff. And just I've actually just been watching like screenwriting videos, because I feel like there's a channel on YouTube called Film Courage.
Oh, cool.
That I have been binging a bunch of screenwriting videos from, and just the way they speak about story helps me put some things into context. That, and also I think having worked with film directors over the last couple of years on film projects, I think the way they look at story and the way they look at something and the potential of a scene has really helped me tap into that side of my brain that I guess always existed in the playing and in the expression, but I couldn't articulate, so I didn't know what the point was. It would escape me sometimes, and sometimes I'd have to fake my way into it. But there's like, when you listen to something or when you see something, there's a potential of what it can be, and that potential can be a million different shades on a spectrum, depending on who you are, what you want to say, and what the thing is, and what you have around you, what tools you have available, what your medium is. There's so many things that can dictate what that expression finally becomes. But in my monkey brain, it kind of breaks down into some form of appropriation. It's like, if I want something to feel dangerous, I'm gonna just like in the stupidest way write down, or like my brain is gonna go to, the most obvious danger, pop culture, like whatever, like things. And the fact that my brain does, I know that most other people's brains also might kind of go there, and it might resonate at some level. So playing with cliches to make it simpler, I guess, or playing with tropes, is something that I do a lot.
Tropes is like basically the non-negative word for cliche.
Yeah.
Which is, it just occurred to me while you...
I don't think cliches... Yeah, I mean, I don't think cliches are negative either.
Well, that's the larger point, right? Like,
badly used, not used without clear intent or used without interesting intent.
Well, so I mean,
at the very
creativity,
least.
doing something creative, making an interesting piece of art is a juxtaposition between you're playing with expectations.
Yes,
and so
absolutely.
a cliche or a trope gives you a certain expectation, and then how you play with that expectation is the originality part of it, the part that goes beyond the trope or the cliche.
Yeah.
You know?
And how you set up that expectation as well, how you tap into an expectation.
Yep.
Some people are able to deeper kind of, people who understand deep storytelling a little deeper, or maybe even human behavior or psychology a little deeper, will be able to quickly immerse you in their ideas or quickly immerse you in their world with 3 words or 4 words. You know, you'll hear me bumbling through sentences because I'm not that eloquent, but people who have that, you know, who have it together a little more on that side of things, they know how to bring you in. And then what they do, you know, they set up the expectation really strong. So many films we watch, we might really love the premise or the first half of the film, and then we don't like the ending. That's because they've set up the expectation really well, but they didn't make the ending or, you know, the payoff interesting enough, or something was disconnected, or it didn't quite ring right. You know. So there's tools for these things. There's processes, and there's things that there's ways that these things have been done before.
Yeah.
And I think something that, especially, I would say, I definitely growing up looked down upon tradition, tools, things that people told me I should do. You know, and that led me to have a unique aesthetic and a unique perspective on things, of course. But as time has gone on, I've realized these things are there for a reason. And the reason is that they tap into something deeper within the human psyche. There's something cyclical about it. There's something that just works. And to understand the tools and to use them and then misuse them and break them whenever you want is a better way to go about things than maybe just disregarding the fact that these tools are of any value at all.
Yeah.
If I'm making sense.
No, that makes a lot of sense, and it resonates with me as well. I would describe my journey through music as sort of oscillating between those 2 points of sort of being rooted in and pointing at traditions and established norms of composition, and then getting tired of that and feeling like what I'm doing is too predictable, and then going off into like, let me just make strange noise for like a couple of years. And then going back and saying, oh, no, I need some structure and form. And then finally figuring out a way to combine those things. And I mean, there's actually so much in there in what you're saying. Like there's, when you play with expectations and then how you break those expectations can relate to, say, consonance and dissonance, or tension and resolution.
Yep.
Like all these,
absolutely.
all, you know, denial and reward, right? And so there's so much, and it's cool that you mentioned that about screenwriting, because I mean, for me, a big source of insight with regards to music production has, for a long time now, been architecture.
That's
and just
cool.
like the general design principles, to the extent that I know them. It's not like I'm an architect or anything, but one of the books that I always recommend, I've said it a few times on the podcast, I think, whenever someone asks me for like, what's a good book on music production, which is a crazy question, it seems, I always suggest 101 Things I Learned in Architecture School by Matthew Frederick. And it's this like coffee table book. It's easy to read. And so many of those concepts it's amazing how many of those concepts apply to music composition. And it seems like there is like a general sort of like design, the abstract concept of design can be applied to many things like music, visual arts, screenwriting, literature, narrative, you know.
True.
So that's been a big inspiration for me, and I'm also reminded of when I think my friend told me this anecdotally, so I don't know how true it is, but I remember he was telling me, we were in high school at the time, he's like, man, I was reading about that new Rage Against the Machine album, and Tom Morello was talking about his influences, and he was saying he was like really influenced by these comedians. I was like, I remember being 18 hearing that. I'm like, wow, I don't know what that means, but like Yeah.
It makes sense in retrospect, I guess.
I
mean, yeah, I think musicians are always influenced by comedians, and comedians are influenced by musicians.
Yeah.
I think there's something very similar there.
Yeah. Well,
about the process.
I perhaps because I'm not a musician that performs so much and I'm behind the scenes. Perhaps that's still a little elusive to me. But yeah, maybe the aspect of performing. But certainly with jokes, you still have this idea of narrative or this idea of expectations, and then sort of subverting those expectations in some kind of way. So there's lots that translates.
Yeah, I think it's the performance aspect. I think you find your persona on stage only by doing it a bunch of times, because you can't lie for too long.
Yep.
Otherwise, you will burn out and you'll feel like shit at the end of every performance, and the audience will know.
Yeah.
After, even if you're really good, and maybe they won't know the first 3 times or 4 times, but the 5th or 10th time, they'll know.
Yeah.
So I think that's the parallel that we find. It's kind of like getting on stage and actually expressing and improvising and setting up. Everything you do is setting up an expectation, right? The stage is like it's blank. There's nothing there.
Yeah.
And as soon as you step on, based on your body language, based on what you carry on with you, based on the way you're dressed, based on the words you say, the way you say them, based on the chord you play and the tempo and the feeling and the volume, and everything says something that the audience is picking up and internalizing, whether or not they know it, in an instant, but they know, they always know.
Authenticity is so important. I mean, that's the
and
thing.
even you can. It's not that everyone is dramatizing things. You were all there for the drama. It's not that when you're on stage singing about something or talking about something or acting out Macbeth or whatever, or talking, doing a comedy routine, doesn't mean you mean everything you say literally.
Yep.
Doesn't mean if you're doing cartwheels on stage, it doesn't mean that's what you do in your spare time. It none of that.
You don't know what I'm doing in my spare time, man.
Yeah, there's a balance there, that there's an authenticity. It's like you can only do something a million times if there some part of it is true.
Yeah.
So doing it a bunch of times, and then you can dramatize whatever you want. But the bits of you that are you will percolate through, and you will, if you're honest with yourself, start losing the stuff that's hurting or the stuff that's useless or superficial.
Yeah.
No, that's a tremendous insight. I think I'm learning a lot. I mean, there are a lot of differences between what you and I do, even though we're in a similar profession. But the big difference right away is that you perform a lot as well, or you used to before COVID.
Used
at least.
to.
Yeah.
Before COVID. Yeah.
But you're also like a powerhouse in the studio, both behind the boards and also in front of an instrument. So actually, maybe we can elaborate on that. So I'm the type of producer. There's like maybe 3 categories of things I do or have done. So like one of them is you make a beat, maybe a hip hop R&B style beat, and some vocalist likes that and writes to it. Then there's the other thing I do, which is I produce rock bands. So that's a situation where they've written a bunch of music mostly, and I'm just there to like be the director of sorts. And then there's the other kind of situation where like maybe I meet a vocalist and we create something together, like the arrangement together. Those are my 3 main things. I like once scored a film that was never released, but I won't count that for now. But so, I mean, out of that's me, and you know that already. But like, what are the different types of composition, production types of scenarios that you find yourself in?
Mostly in the last category you mentioned, mostly where it's like with one singer, or whether it's a friend or it's someone who's approached me or approached us at Salvage Audio and kind of said, "Oh, this is my song, this is my arrangement. I need your help to make it better." It's mostly on that category, and then the film work, where we've mostly just been composing, producing, arranging for films that come in, independent films and commercial films.
You guys have been killing it on the films.
Sweet, thank you. Yeah, it's been touch wood. We've been lucky. Since the Gully Boy thing happened, we've had all good experiences.
Yeah.
That's the good thing.
The Gully Boy film was a huge deal, and it occurred, like those sessions occurred right in the middle of when we were working on Short Round's album.
Yeah.
So I remember sort of
Yeah.
meeting you on and off, and it was very like secretive and intense period of composition. But that film made a pretty big impact. And I actually, since that film, I don't remember, just ambiently existing in Bombay, I don't remember a film since then that at least I've been aware of to the point where I just know the name of it.
Yeah.
And it certainly made a splash. And it was a great concept, interesting concept. So can you shed some light on what it is that you and Salvage Audio contributed to that?
So we were initially called on by Karsh. I think he got the call from Zoya or Ankur, who was the music supervisor, and he called us on, and we didn't even know the name of the project in the beginning. He was like, "Oh, we're working on a film with Zoya Akhtar. Would you guys be interested in helping out?" And we were like, "Hell yeah, let's do it." And we basically got in a room with him and looked at the scenes that they were sending us and spoke about the sound that we wanted to kind of explore for the film, what would be interesting, and just split up a few scenes and started writing. And that basically just snowballed, and that process continued on. Zoya came in and was such a great kind of shepherd of the whole ship. To answer your question, we contributed to a chunk of the background score along with Karsh, but that's notwithstanding all the lovely songs that were in there that we have nothing to do with.
Yeah.
We did contribute a little bit to the mix and the backup arrangements for them for the film versions to homogenize it with everything else.
Yeah.
Because they were coming in from all over the country from producers who had done them in their bedrooms. And this had to play in theaters all over the world.
Yeah.
So just to
Got to get that bass right.
Yeah, stuff like that. We just reamped some stuff at the studio, reprogrammed a few things to...
Reamped. That's interesting. Sorry to cut you off. That fascinates me very much. Because the concept of reamping is interesting just generally. But these are hip hop arrangements. So in what context would you be reamping things? What types of sounds?
Mostly just bass.
Yeah?
And not replacing always, but just reinforcing.
Just a layer.
Stuff to just like beef it up and make it not feel thin in a big studio, in a big cinema hall.
Right.
And because everything else had been written at the studio, the background score, so we were writing it for large scale, and it covered the whole frequency range.
Yeah.
And not that the songs that we received didn't, I guess, but it was. I mean, you need to fit it all in, and it needs to flow.
It has to. Yeah, I was just going to say it has to flow.
Like one thing.
That's really interesting thing that maybe a lot of people don't realize is like if you've got a film that's about music, and so all this music is getting submitted, to be featured, and they're like legit songs outside of the film that stand alone, and in order to sort of fit them into the film, some adjustments are made. More so, just from not even. Like there's artistry involved.
I don't even know if people would notice it.
Yeah, like it's not even.
I don't even know.
It's less from an artistry point of view, as far as what I'm understanding, but just as a way to make the frequency distribution, so that like all of a sudden one song doesn't sound super different or removed from the score than the next piece of music that happens, and that's something that probably a lot of people may not realize. Certainly, I hadn't thought about it until you just mentioned it to me. And so that's quite a cool thing. So things have been going really well for you guys since that time, eh?
Yeah, we've been lucky. We did a film called Ye Ballet soon after that, which is on Netflix. And recently, we're happy to know that it's like the highest IMDb rated Indian film on Netflix or something like that. Made a list. It's made a few lists.
Nice.
We're happy about that. Yeah, it's a lovely film. It was really fun to write for. With a lovely director called Suni Tarapurwala, who's since become a dear friend of all of ours. And we were lucky enough to even mix the film at Abbey Road Studios back in December.
Wow.
where Viraj and I got super lucky to go check it out.
That's super cool.
And geek out for 3 days.
Yeah, that's
while the engineers did their amazing job and
that's next
fixed all
level
of our
geek out.
issues.
Come on, that's crazy.
Yeah, it was pretty great, and I'm so glad that happened before this pandemic hit. And I'm so glad I, slogged my ass off and didn't sleep for nights to make money to go and do that. It was fun.
I'm really happy for you and proud of you, and all of you guys at Salvage. And that kind of makes me, so I'm not going to make you give a history of Salvage Audio, because if anybody wants a history of Salvage Audio, they can go listen to my podcast with JJ. I was talking to your colleague, Rohan Rajadhyaksha, and I was like, I want to have you on the podcast. And he was like,
yeah, you should.
Well, no. I was like, get on this podcast, son. And he was like, no, but JJ said mostly everything that needs to be said. It's like, look, man, I want to talk about you, right? Like, and hopefully we can convince him maybe now that you're on here as well. So
I'll try
we'll
as
twist his arm or whatever. But
I'll needle him into doing it.
So instead of getting you to recount the history of Salvage Audio, like I said, anyone can listen to my episode with JJ. Can you give us maybe an idea of how unique or not unique Salvage Audio is in terms of a concept, like in terms of a collective of composers, producers, however you want to describe yourselves, that is kind of on hire, doing work for films, doing work for artists. Like how common is that in the scene?
It's not. I don't think it's too novel or it's like a unique concept or anything. I think it's been tried before, done before. In the States, definitely there are production crews, and there's teams that work for hire. And even here, like Blue Frog, I think tried the same thing 10 years ago with their studios.
Cool.
And there's I don't know. I don't know if there's like it's not new. The thing that might be different about us, or the thing that makes us work really well, is that we've all known each other for a little while. Maybe not, so personally that we do now, but a bunch of them have. We've all worked with each other in different capacities over the last 10 years. For example, Stuart gave my band Spud in the Box our first proper show.
Okay.
Like in 2011 or something like that, when he was organizing the Revival of the Bandstand Festival. That was the name, where he did a great job. He went around and basically put up a festival in Bombay on all the public bandstands. So one was at Hanging Gardens, one was at Dadar Chapati, all outdoors, all free to the public.
I did not know that there were
some great artists.
Sorry to cut you off. I didn't know.
Yeah.
I didn't know there were that many bandstands.
They exist.
I only know bandstand as like a place in Bandra, as like a place. Like you're in an auto and you're like, I need to go to bandstand.
No, that's just that's the name of. But there's a spot there as well. The reason I guess all that the place might be called that is because there's a spot where you can perform over there.
Yeah.
And there's a spot in all of these places. So he just organized a festival across, and he got the police band to come play.
Oh, sick.
Their horns and stuff. It was cool.
Oh, very cool.
So yeah, I know him from back then. JJ used to run Cotton Press Studios with Stu and with a bunch of other people, and with Ro. And so I'd worked there a bunch of times over the last 10 years. I knew them really well. Viraj and I have performed in a couple of different bands together over the last 5 or 6 years. So we're close friends already. We would be each other's competitors if we weren't working together, kind of, because we are interested in similar things and similar projects and, similar kinds of music and work. And we would be hiring each other also quite often, I think. So it just makes sense for the 5 of us.
It's a great idea.
Now,
it's a great idea. When I heard, when I like fully understood what the concept of, I don't want to say fully because maybe there's lots that I'm not getting, but when I kind of understood the concept of Salvage Audio, I was like, this is a great idea. And this is one of these things that like I wish I knew when I was younger. Like when I was younger, and especially when I was a bit more arrogant, and I identified as a multi-instrumentalist, I was pretty set on trying to do everything myself. But what you guys are doing, it really shows the importance of having a network and a team, and really being willing to help each other out and also like you were saying, it sort of bypasses this sort of weird competitive thing that it can be good and productive, and people, you can, like, competitiveness can help everyone grow, but then there is this like strange toxic angle to it that exists that is kind of subverted by the fact that you guys are like, no, let's just join forces. Like, there's lots of work out there.
Yeah.
And let's
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I feel like we make each other better because we've learned over time, and it's an ongoing process, but we're touchwood getting better and better at just putting our egos aside when we're discussing a cue or a project or a piece of music or anything. And that really helps because you can contribute whatever you want to contribute, but you can trust that there's 4 other checkpoints, that are going to check your bullshit.
It's very important. Very important. I've thankfully, I've had you, as I've been working on these last 2 projects, I've had, Mally's been sending out the stuff to you and to Rohan, the other Rohan, and so thankfully, even though I'm not in Salvage Audio, I've still had the luxury of having you guys check my bullshit on
having the Salvage Audio
checklist. Yeah. So that's good.
That's pretty funny. We should monetize that.
Yeah, for sure. So I think maybe, I don't know how long it was ago, pretty recently, you made a post on Instagram that kind of blew up. And it was a post about, it blew up to the point where they wrote about it in Rolling Stone India.
Yeah,
and
it's a funny one.
It's funny. It's also interesting, and I think it is a relevant thing to maybe hash out in a more nuanced way. I remember reading the comments on the post, and there was a lot of lively discussion in the comments, and even when the article about your post came out. And that's something, right? Like I'm out here, I got to make a record in order to get an article written about it. You're just out here just making social media posts, and it's like,
well, I think if you made the post, it would be written about as well, probably.
I'm being a little bit silly, but there was a lot of lively, even when I'd seen people share the article. I think I shared the article as well, but you'd see people, even in the comments on Facebook, kind of having a lively discussion about the various nuances. Do you want to?
Yeah.
I figure I should let you explain what you were saying in that post rather than me say it.
Well, that was a day when I think we were faced with a particular frustration that I won't get into. And it's something that we deal with. It's something that I think everyone deals with quite a bit. And the way I put it out, I think, was not probably the most nuanced or the most balanced view on the take, or the healthiest either. But it was a reaction, basically. It was just like, oh man.
It was real.
Like, this keeps happening.
Yeah.
This keeps happening, and I'm a bit pissed about it, and this is my social media. So
it needed to happen, and I'm glad you did it. And I mean, the lack
I think it goes deeper though. I think the more I think about it, and since that post and all the discussion that happened in the comments and all the comments, I think has been super healthy and like super positive. And maybe heated a couple of times, but not negative in any way, which is amazing. And that's how it always should be, I think.
Well, and that's why I wanted to bring it up, because the post was epic, but the discussion around it is really what was so productive,
Yeah, I think it made me think deeper as well, and I'm still thinking about these things because it's kind of like it ties into the intent thing quite strongly now to me.
Well, before you elaborate on it more, can you just summarize what you had kind of said and then go into the more, just so people know what the hell we're talking about?
If I remember correctly, I said something along the lines of the fact that music producers contribute to a large amount of the final product you hear, and often the lead singer or the person whose name is on the project doesn't even quite know what's going into it, and there's a lower value placed upon music producers for some reason. There's a disregard for their input and disregard for their contribution, whereas it takes a lot of time to get inside somebody else's head and get behind their story and get behind their intent for often not that much money, none.
Yep.
You know, sometimes when it's a work for hire thing for a commercial project, that's a different situation. That's usually not what I'm talking about with a post.
That's how we survive. And I mean, in that situation,
Yeah.
the commercial stuff, like an ad or something, then also in those situations, like, I mean, the few instances where I've done those types of projects, I'm not even really using creativity so much. Like, I just ask for a reference and try to stick to it, especially if the pay isn't super great. But those types of projects are the ones where you do count on the pay being much better because it's
and you know what you're getting into
yeah.
because it's a contractual thing from the get-go, and there's certain norms, even though still not as stringent or as well defined as they could or should be, I guess. But there's at least a certain kind of history of how things should go, even if that history is young and recent, you know. So we're lucky that we've kind of we're doing this now, and we don't have to fight the fights that they were fighting 20 years ago,
correct,
or 15 years ago, or even 10 years ago. You know, and some of my colleagues were fighting those fights 10 years ago because they've been doing it that long.
Yeah.
But yeah, so on the commercial side of things, that's a different conversation, I guess. But with the independent stuff, I think, it's a weird one because it comes down to like temperament, human kind of personality, belief systems, and a lot of that. And the more I thought about it,
sometimes even friendships.
Yeah, I mean, like in the sense that I think people are not looking at it the same way often.
Yeah.
When two parties agree to collaborate on something, I think our vocabulary fails us, and we don't really know how to identify a shared goal with all its limitations and all its possibilities.
Yeah.
And the problem often is that the artist that comes to you as a when you're a music producer, we've all been there. Like, I've been there as an artist or a songwriter myself when I've taken music to other producers and been like, hey, help me. Here's the song I wrote. Here's this arrangement I have. Make it better, you know, and help me finish it, and help me mix it, help me whatever, produce it. And I've been lucky enough to have people in my life that were patient with me, that knew where to draw their boundaries. Some of them didn't, and let me take advantage of that a little bit too much, in my opinion, maybe in retrospect. But I've been lucky to have those interactions early on and kind of learn from that. And so now, whenever it's a collaborative thing, I try, if someone's calling me to play keys on their album or on their song or something, I'll do it. You know, that's fine if I have the time. But if they want my intent, or if they want my personality on it, that's a different conversation.
Yeah.
Kind of, almost. And that conversation, I guess, just needs to happen more and more, because I think when someone comes to you and says, hey, help me produce this song, often, or sometimes in my experience has been that the song is just a vocal track, and it's one guitar or one something else, which is fine. That doesn't mean, you know, that this person's written a great song. You know, that doesn't take anything away from their artistry, their potential, and their credibility at all. But where technology is at today, where you don't see the credits when, you know, you engage with a piece of music on a streaming platform, whereas before you'd buy the record and you'd see the credits in there, so you would at least internalize something.
That's a big
one. Oh, there was this team that existed. Every record you bought had 4, 5, 10 pages of thanks and of and listing the number of personnel and people and gear and everything went into making that record.
I used to love looking through those. That's how I learned, like, you know, especially on records where there's like each song is produced by someone different. It was great to go through the CD insert and like try and see who produced this. And then once you got a feel for it, you would kind of guess, this is definitely Timbaland. This is definitely the Neptunes. This is definitely Just Blaze.
Absolutely. And it gave you some ownership as a listener as well, to kind of to identify with, like, oh, I like this. This is the aesthetic I like, you know, because I've liked so many of this person's productions or this person's writing or whatever. But with technology today, that doesn't quite exist yet. I'm sure it will cycle back. I'm confident in I hope.
I think it will.
Maybe not so sure.
This genius thing is part of it, I think.
I'm pretty positive in that sense that it will cycle back the more people talk about it.
Yeah.
But I guess, the post was just a momentary kind of frustration point and a way of sparking something. It's like, yo, let's talk about this.
It certainly was
why
successful.
does nobody talk about this?
It was definitely successful in sparking the conversation, and I enjoyed. Maybe enjoyed is not the right word. It was fruitful to look through the comments and read the different types of takes that people had on it. And there was also like the discussion, I can't remember about in your post specifically, but in the discussions that ensued, there was also some ambiguous references to compensation, which is another, like there's two aspects of this. There's the being credited properly, and then there's the being compensated in a way that you think is fair. And I feel like your post was more focused on the credit part of it. But is there?
I mean, they go hand in hand a little bit.
Yeah, they do.
I feel like the credit should honestly just be ubiquitous.
Yep.
Whether or not you're being compensated monetarily for something, if you did it, you should get credit for it, because that's, someone else can own the publishing. That's fine. That's up to discussion and that's up to negotiation. But they shouldn't be able to pass off your work as their work.
Correct.
That's kind of the heart of what I was trying to say.
I think you've said it really well.
In independent artists, especially, the compensation doesn't exist, and that's mutually agreed upon. I'm not saying that isn't. That's mutually agreed upon. I'm not going to take money from my friend to do this.
Yeah.
Or I know they're trying to make a record and putting all their money into it, so I'll charge a nominal fee just to keep whatever, something. But that agreement still should not invalidate the fact that I did something that made this record what it is, however small or however large. And I think it's, I think the lack of credits on our kind of devices and on our streaming platforms might really just be the issue. Who knows? Maybe that's what it is.
Yeah.
If the platform was available and if the space was available, I don't know if artists would really mind giving that credit. They'd probably be happy to do it because they'd be happy to have more names under that freaking list. Well, and say, oh, look at how many people worked on my record.
Well, it depends. Knows? Like, I think I've met people that have a variety of different attitudes. I'm pretty adamant about I'm pretty thorough with crediting. And like, as a producer who's usually on projects, like most of the projects I've done are albums length. I haven't really worked on a singles in a while, but I'm usually keeping track of everybody that's coming in, like every person that came in to do a group vocal, anybody that was there just engineering, setting up mics. Like it's really important to me. I've met a lot of people, especially younger musicians or artists, that just really don't care. Like, and for me, it's like, just put in the YouTube video that you put out, there's a more button that you can click, and it expands, and there's all this space where you can put the people that contributed, or like in the SoundCloud link, there's a description section. Like, just for the love of God, like just put the people's names in there, that helped you make this thing.
It is really that easy.
And so there are definitely, even despite the streaming platforms that we have, there are certain circumstances where you're like, you could have just easily put this information in, and with some people, you can tell that it just doesn't occur to them. Like, it's just like, oh, wait, and I think for maybe some people who just only are familiar with the streaming or have spent most of their life with that, maybe that's what they're used to. There's that angle. And I do find that like with front-facing artists, like singers, leads, and I mean, we have a lot of wonderful friends, singers, songwriters, vocalists that we work with that are awesome. But just sometimes, few cases here and there is this tendency, especially when it's a front-facing artist, a lead singer type artist, where they do feel like everyone exists specifically for them. Like that vibe can sometimes come across, and sometimes it's innocent enough, and all you need to do is sort of like facilitate a way for them to realize that that's what's happening, and they're cool with it. But then there are other instances where that I've worked with people where they really they just think that like everybody exists just so they can make an album, and and that
And you know, to be honest, I've been there. I've been on that side of things.
Yeah.
When I was in Spot in the Box and it was my album being made.
Yeah.
I've been on that side of things, but I was lucky to have people that, you know, that showed me the way and kind of helped me realize how things don't happen that quickly.
Yep.
It's ignorance. A lot of it is truly ignorance.
Yep, yep.
You really don't know.
Yep.
You know, you really don't know what it is that's going into the final product that you're listening to.
Correct.
I used to listen to reference like mixes and stuff that people would send me on the tiniest earphones, you know, 5-10 years ago, or maybe, back then when I was walking around and listening to everything on those tiny earphones. Yes, that's valid, the fact that that's your reference point. But when you're trying to create something, you can't hear half the shit that's, you know, you can't hear so much of the frequency spectrum on that you don't know how shitty your track actually sounds, you know.
Yeah.
And you don't know how much better it is now that this person's spent some time cleaning it up. That all you hear is your mistakes, but clearer.
Yeah.
You know, that's all you hear.
Yep.
You don't realize that it's in the arrangement choices, it's in the performance, it's in the intent, it's in the fact that you got carried away and got attached to a lot of parts that if you just thought about a little more objectively, you could summarize what you were trying to say very, very succinctly and very, you know, in a much more economical fashion, whether it's a bass line, whether it's a whole song, whether it's a lyric, whether it's anything. You know, there's these things that you could learn to do better that would help everybody along the way, as a songwriter or as an artist yourself. And I think it's an empowerment thing. If you have the tools, if you have access to the tools, you should engage with them.
Yep.
That's the main thing. Once you begin engaging with them, you'll know how far down that ladder you are, and it's okay to be at the complete bottom, because I've definitely been there all my life, you know, and it's a slow climb up. But if you attack it with enthusiasm and kind of like want to learn, then you will slowly.
Curiosity. That's whatever small distance I've traversed is mainly because of that, right? It's just because of curiosity and what you said, enthusiasm to sort of continue and just learn and progress. That is fascinating. Did you basically summarize what you summarized kind of the intent of your post or where your post came from? Has your thinking evolved at all on this since all the discussions that happened, or did you already just mention that in what you just said?
I guess a bit. I mentioned a bit of it. I guess maybe. Yeah, but it has evolved. It's just that I feel like we gotta be the change.
Yep.
I can't force other people to change. I can't force other people to feel a certain way or look a certain way or, you know, really understand the importance of certain things. And it's made me think a lot deeper about the music that I'm writing and have been writing for a long time, and the contributors that have already contributed to that. You know, and how much I should figure for the publishing splits for that, who I should credit as a writer if they wrote a guitar part that sparked a whole bridge, who I should, you know. And I think it should just start individually. Those of us that really feel this way, we should, you know, not that it wasn't the case before. That's how my records were always. We would give credit everywhere, but it's you can't change the world. You can only change yourself. That's what what I came away with it. That's what I came away from that with.
No, that's all very important stuff, and it's good that you started that discussion. So you mentioned some of the solo music you were working on, and I wanted to say this at the beginning of the podcast, because at the beginning of the podcast, usually we start off with mispronunciations and pronunciations, and I assume I've said your last name correctly, Rajadhyaksha.
Yep.
Is that Well, so but the one of the funnier things you've said to me in our conversations. One time we were in an auto and we were traveling to Island City, and I was asking you about this solo music because I've had the pleasure of hearing, I think, at least one or two of your solo tracks, which I believe are still unreleased. Correct?
Yeah. Nothing's out there.
Yeah. So I remember kind of asking you how that was coming along, and then I remember asking you what what do you think you might call your like the project? You're just going to release it under your own name, or you're going to come up with like a pseudonym or something like that? And the hilarious thing that you said to me was, I think I'm just going to put it out under my name, and if these white people like my music, then they can learn how to pronounce my name. It's like,
yeah. That's basically what probably will happen.
Mm-hmm.
I've been thinking more and more about. I've been thinking about that during the lockdown as well. I've been re-looking at a lot of those songs and rewriting a lot of them because I've had a little more time than before. The touring schedule is not on. Even though the films are happening and the commercial work was on, I had at least a little time off to be inspired, get into the screenwriting video stuff, and learn a few new tricks, or at least learn a new way of looking at the same thing I've been looking at for the last few years.
Yeah.
And that's really helped. I've always had a really hard time rewriting stuff. So that the screenwriting stuff has really helped me. Like, oh, cool, you can be dispassionate about lyrics, and you can like be dispassionate about structure, and you can look at them in blocks and blah, blah, blah. But yeah, this whole lockdown period has made me kind of not want to put my name out there for some reason, more and more. Almost to a point of like, I don't even want anyone to know who made this music, maybe. But who knows?
It'll be like
I keep
Burial.
going back and forth.
It'll be like Burial.
Yeah, it'll be difficult. It's too difficult though.
Yeah.
It's too much of an effort, like to have an alias that people don't know who it is. Blah blah blah. It's kind of a game that you have to play. Mm-hmm. That if you're sure.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure yet.
Even coming up with an alias that you won't regret like a couple of years down the line, like, oh, like that's a cheesy name. I wish I hadn't named myself that way. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I wouldn't go under an alias if I was putting my face on it, for sure.
Yeah.
But if I'm not putting my face on it, then maybe.
Yeah. That's interesting.
But
I kind of want to dig into this a bit more. What changed during lockdown that made you think you maybe don't want to put your face on it, or that you might want to, if I understand you correctly?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I've had nothing else to do except sit at home, work on the projects I have going on, and then look at my phone, or listen to a podcast when I go out for a run down in my building.
Yeah.
And the world is a pretty divisive place, in case anybody's missed that.
Oh man.
Missed that boat. Yeah. It's quite an opinionated place. There's so much baggage with everything, with every post. There's too much context almost.
Too much.
And a glaring lack of it at the same time. It's weird.
It's well said.
So I really like the idea of a blank slate, or I really like the idea of something without baggage. Mm-hmm. And even though I'm not like a popular personality, or there's nothing attached to my name in that sense, even then, even a name is, you're saying something. Like I said in that auto the other day, it's kind of like, okay, cool. If I put my name on it, it's saying, hey, this is a name. Engage with this name.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And now attach your ideas to this name, which is fine, which is what's going to happen when I put my music out. And that's what happens when you put anything out into the world. But I guess it might be a selfish mechanism, or a way just to disassociate my personal life from the potential of what the work can be over a span of time. Maybe not with this project or these set of songs or whatever, but I think when you put a name and a face on something, there's automatically an expectation in place. And you can break that expectation and you can keep doing that. That's great. But it's harder for some reason. It seems easier if this could be coming from anyone, anywhere.
Yeah.
Anything.
There's lots in there. I kind of wish we were in the same room smoking a J or something, because this is like that's that type of conversation I like to have. I mean, I just almost too much to dig into. It's overwhelming. I almost need to like change the subject for the purpose of the podcast. Like,
sure,
but I mean that there's lots, because you're talking about sort of deep philosophical ideas about, naming and identity. Like there's lots of implications there about, and in relation to things that you create. So I mean, it's very rich.
I mean, we are like, at least I think it's important to me because that's the way I interpret and internalize the world, and that's the way I've done it all my life. It's all been kind of Chinese whispers. It's all been, nobody sat me down and told me, hey, look, this is the way things are.
Yeah.
And not too many people that I agreed with anyway. The people that tried to do that to me, I didn't agree with them.
Yeah.
And maybe I learned some things later on that, they were talking some sense. But I still don't agree that is a hard, I don't agree that there's one way to live your life, or you could do anything you want. This is a canvas. It just depends on what you have available to you. Depends on what circumstances you were born into and what you've kept along the way.
Yeah.
You could do whatever you want. I could stop playing music tomorrow. How does it matter? As long as I can make money, feed myself, and continue to live until a certain point, nothing matters. That's kind of my approach with these things.
That's a very good attitude. A lot of people might find it alarming, but I think it's a good attitude because we do live in a world where, I mean, it's full of content creation. There's so many artists, and there's so many just talented people, and we know better than anyone else. Like when you're doing music, and you're surrounded by talented people, it can be overwhelming. And the having that bit of it doesn't matter, let me just do this thing approach can really help you get the thing done in the first place. Because
because I think the way I percolate that is like when I look at people that are making content or making music or making art or films or whatever, oftentimes, even growing up, I think it might be an ego thing, might be something, but I was very strong in my kind of like, I like this, I don't like this. Or it's more like, maybe I wouldn't even dismiss it as bad, but it's more like useful and useless.
Yeah.
I still kind of categorize things into that. It's like useful right now, useless right now, maybe useful later.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, if it's a new piece of work or if it's a book someone tells me to read, or if it engages with me, if it reaches me at the right moment, if it speaks in the language that interests me and is teaching me something and is bringing me in, then it's worthy of my time. If it doesn't, then I don't want to sit and study something or read something that you think is important. Who are you to tell me what's important? That's kind of been my attitude all my life. And that does hurt sometimes. That does hurt you sometimes because it doesn't, it leads you to being, or leads me to being rigid about certain things and not learn some very easy tricks that, like, there's a sustain pedal. You could just use the sustain pedal.
I like how you tied it back to that. It's good.
But that's what it...
Yeah, no, it's great.
That is
it's great. It's
the
very
way
good.
I look at it, is that nothing cool came out of, like, taking the easy way out, right? And it doesn't mean that I'm actively seeking the tough way to do things. No, I'm fucking lazy. I'll do the easiest thing. I'll quantize my shit. I'll do whatever.
Yeah.
But the point is that it's a bit of a game. What can you afford to handicap yourself with in order to work that muscle? What can you afford to... So for the longest time, I didn't even realize, but all through my childhood, I was kind of very attracted towards harmony, melody, and I didn't even think about rhythm. Like, rhythm didn't even really, like, until much, much later on, like in the last 10 years, that's the only time. But I've been playing since I was 4 or 5 years old. So that's like now more than 20 years ago. So for the first 10 years of my life or 15 years of my life, all I was thinking about was harmony and melody, maybe vocal phrasing and inflection, ear candy, for the lack of a better word, something. What were the points where everything aligned just most interestingly, even if not like harmoniously or correctly? What was the point in the song where things would come together and come apart, where the storyline of the bass, the storyline of the drums, the storyline of the vocals, the storyline of the chords would all kind of be at its most heated and interesting point? I would listen to like Rahman's songs and listen to how he went through a whole phase where at least in my head, it was a phase in my monkey brain when I was young. He probably was doing this way before I knew it was a thing. But it was kind of, I went through a phase of kind of listening to his music and being like, oh, he's taking this melody that's in the beginning of the song that has a certain, feeling about the chords. And by the end of the song, the chords are completely different, but it's the same melody. Like it's in a fully different, now I know it's like in a different mode, it's reharmonized, with that specific intent. But back then, I was just like, oh, how do you do that? That sounds like, that makes me feel something, It's expectation and breaking that expectation.
There you go.
Or like, it's the same thing. So that kind of notion I was tied into very strongly from when I was young. And anything that didn't have that high stakes drama or high stakes kind of like setup and payoff, it didn't interest me so much. It just like the nuance in things or in smaller things didn't really interest me so much as things that were boldly saying, hey, look at me, I'm this, and then maybe changing it or taking you down a story or whatever, so strong melodies, that's what I was into, and strong harmony and the intersection that whole thing. Yeah, where the storyline kind of, I'm making a lot of gestures with my hand. I realize there's no video for this. But
So up till now, you were making gestures with your hands because you assumed there was a video.
Yeah, I completely forgot.
Which is funny. Let's just go with that story.
Yeah. Yeah,
no,
but
the gestures are good.
The
gestures are good, though.
So what I was saying is that being so focused in on one thing, one aspect of something, and completely ignoring the other, obviously leads you to have a biased view on the subject. But it also leads you to have a slightly deeper or closer relationship with what you've been engaging with for a long time. So I do think I have a deep relationship with melody and harmony, and kind of knowing what interests me or where I want to take this, or what surprises me in the right way for this song, or what surprises me in the right way for this cue or this piece of music. There's just there's something that I can like imagine, even though it's not a fully built image, but it's like a Venn diagram, and it's all I have to do. And it's not easy, so it's not all I have to do, but the main thing I have to do is find the right funnel for all the bullshit that's gonna come. As soon as I start expressing, there's a lot of shit that's going to come out. If I have the right funnel, then the right stuff will go in and the right stuff will stay out.
Yeah.
And that funnel usually is aided by the stuff I've focused a long time on. So if it's a film, and the director's telling me about a certain story and I don't know what to do, or I don't have a trope in mind immediately, I'm gonna go to the piano and I'm gonna just try to feel the thing. And I'm just going to trust that this experience I've built up of feeling a thing and just letting it happen is going to produce something surprising.
Yeah.
And something worth evaluating and messing around with. Now, I can be the learning aspect, and where you look at it holistically, and when you start learning about, rhythm exists, the way you play a thing, and the silence between the notes, and the way when you pick up the note from the piano or lift off the note is as important as when you put it down or when you press down on it. And these things, in composition and arrangement, silence and arrangement, all of these things are things that came to me later because I just didn't think about them. It was just like egotistical and narrow-minded and focused in on one thing, which is like, how do I express with melody and harmony? And how do I create these conflicts, and how do I create these resolutions that help me tell this whatever story I'm trying to tell?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, I think a lot of people would relate to that. I mean, there's certainly things that I've focused in on deeply and have honed to the sort of detriment of other aspects in the broad toolkit that we would use as composers and producers.
Yeah.
I myself, my weakest sort of tool is melody. I'm not super great at melody. I would probably say I'm not even great at melody. I can recognize a good melody when someone else comes up with one, and then from that melody I can often make something quite interesting. But for me, melody is a stumbling block. And I mean, to that point, is there anything off the top of your head you can recommend that I check out, or maybe even like a way of thinking that you can share with me such that I might improve my melodic sensibilities? No pressure.
I don't. It's interesting that you say you don't have a sense of melody. I feel like to produce the kind of music you've been producing with the artists you have. I mean, yeah, you did say you can identify one really well.
Yeah, they come with the melodies.
Even the string arrangements that you wrote or helped write for Mali's latest song, Absolute. All of that is melodic writing. You know, there's a clear, and it's beautiful stuff. Like it's real shit.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's true. Maybe that's just an assumption you've made about yourself.
Those melodies in the cello, I think, were either Mali's composition or partially, or they were implied in the piano playing. If with Absolute, I think
correct
that melody was embedded in the piano playing. With Limbo, maybe it was a bit more, but harmony. I feel pretty confident with harmony. Ever since my high school 11th grade revelation about harmony, I've been really into it, and I have a pretty good ear for it. But melody still eludes me, and so it's something that
I would say that it's something that even I think of as malleable, and like it's not. Funnily enough, as I continue to write and rewrite my songs, my melodies are changing. I was very attached to them over the last few years, and I would kind of keep melody as king, almost, and phrase. But now I've kind of started taking more cues from the rhythm, more cues from even the range of the vocals, and I think I used to mainly take cues from the harmony, like you're saying. Like you would say that there's a certain chord progression and there's a certain cadence in that. There's a certain voice leading innately in that chord progression, which leads to you having a bunch of possibilities that are tossed up at you from the first moment you hear it.
Yep.
Right? Now, those possibilities are usually based on your conditioning and based on what you've been listening to and based on what you'd like to hear over this. And you would start there. That's where I would start. That's where I always start, is what would I like to hear, or what am I instantly what am I singing in my head? What is the voice in my head singing over this? And it's usually something or a combination of things I've heard in the past, things that have worked on a chord progression like this in the past. A song I've heard when I was young, song I heard last week. It's usually that. It's always some form of appropriation. We're never really coming up with something from a vacuum, right? We're always drawing from something. So I guess it just depends on how free you are, how much you're freeing yourself up to listen to what's going on in your head.
Yeah.
Because your head is always making some sounds. Like your head always has like this predictive algorithm that's like, if I just let it go, my head it could just go, like with Neuralink or whatever the shit. If that comes in, technically I could be writing symphonies in my sleep, right? Because sometimes that happens. But when I wake up, I can't notate that shit and I can't quantify it with my skill and understanding of theory. So it doesn't get written. But it doesn't mean it doesn't exist in my head.
That stuff, I've thought about that before. That stuff is uncanny. Like, you're having a dream, and in your dream, it's not even like
you're predicting.
Well, no, but in your dream, it's not even like, I had a dream about composing music. It's like, I had a dream and there was a mariachi band and they were playing this amazing music. And then it's like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
I made up that mariachi music was going on in my head.
Yeah.
When so did I compose that music, and why can I not recall it right now? Like that music that happens in my dreams, am I where is that coming from? Especially when you can't replicate it. Like if you remember and you can, that's okay, cool. I get it.
It's difficult to remember because it's so stream of consciousness.
Yeah.
It's almost like you're reading from the drive directly or something. So it's hard to look at it and capture it. Like it's, I've had that a few times when I've been really ill, when I've been really unwell and had a high fever, probably been in a delirious state and lying down. And I remember when we were doing the Spud record at Yashraj Studios in 2014, I want to say. I fell really sick one day and had to come home half day. And as I was falling asleep, I couldn't, I had no choice, I had no say in this. The record just played again and again, and we hadn't even finished recording it, right? And it's not that, oh, this is how it turned out, I wasn't predicting the future or some shit, but it was a version of it with improvised parts, with how probably my brain ideally wanted to hear it back or something, and I couldn't turn it off. I couldn't go to sleep.
Yeah.
It was just happening. And some other times when I've been in similar states of fever and stuff like that, I'll have like whole orchestral like symphonies and orchestra, whatever, opera stuff just playing in my head when I was young, even when I was not ill. This is a funny one. I don't know if I've actually told anyone this or like even thought about it for a long time. But when I was younger, I used to have this thing where the music would be playing in my head, but I could never finish it. I could never just make it like it would have. I would play a resolution, like I would decide a resolution. Okay, now it's gonna get over, and then another resolution would come up, and it's like, and another resolution would come up, and I would have a hard time shutting it off and not listening to the shit that was going on in my head. And it was usually a fully formed idea, of some sort. And today, if that happened, probably, I could write that down. But it doesn't happen anymore. Thank fucking God. Because I think it would drive me crazy and I might kill myself. But yeah, it's interesting. It's a weird one. I feel like it exists. It exists in our brains. It's all there. It's just about whether we're willing to listen.
Recently, I've been really plagued with just strange noises in my brain. Like... something like I just get the like not music, just I get the desire to just make strange noises, and I have to like use some willpower to like not blurt out a funny noise. Sometimes when I'm recording a voiceover just for a laugh, at the beginning of the voiceover, I'll just make some very strange vocalization. Just so I mean, when one of the things that came to my mind when you were just talking about Neuralink and all the stuff going on in your head, I got kind of jealous because I have had periods in my life where I've been experiencing original compositions in my mind, and it's like I want to get this out, and then sometimes you do get it out successfully, other times not, and then other times intermediate scenarios. But recently, there's been less music going on in my mind and just a lot of weird noises. And I mean, that's just a strange thing that I just felt like sharing.
No, it's fair. I mean, I would agree. In this same here, like recently, I wouldn't say that there's been so much music happening in my mind either that's like of any value. I think it's more like now that we do music as a living every day. That was when I was young, when I was a kid, when I was 7 or 8 years old, or maybe 10 years old.
Yeah.
And I didn't have the outlet. Maybe I had a keyboard at home, but I didn't have anything. I was just going to school every day. I was fucking anxious, I hated school and I wanted escape. It was probably just pent up shit. Now that I'm a slightly more resolved person internally, that pent up shit doesn't exist so much, and I have something that I'm giving to every day. Whether or not it's in there, whether or not the well is full, I have to give for my job every day. I can't lie at my job too much or else I won't be hired again. And I mean in terms of like the music I create, or like I've even something funny. I was talking to my dad about this recently, where like every time I'm like, for the last couple of films, every time I come up with something that I'm like, whoa, I'm really like, this is great. Like, I'm really vibing with this. This is so great, and then I go and have a coffee and I walk around like adrenaline fueled ego trip. And as soon as I send it to the director, and then when we get on a call, it's like, it's good. But, and it's usually because I've gotten lost in the process, and I've run with something, and I'm excited about it, so I'm running with it. But it's not serving the purpose of the story. Or it is at some level, but there are some things that I need to change or remove. Most of the time, I need to remove 30-40% of it, and it already works. So it's like I have to kind of give every day anyway, so that it's empty. I need you need some amount of vacuum and some amount of not expressing in order for it to start building up to that point of burst.
It
won't burst if you're giving it out every day for free.
That's very true. I mean, I've experienced much of what you're saying, similar types of things, much of what you're saying, and I go through these phases when I'm really giving into a project. and then like all my own sort of music that I want to make, all of a sudden I can't. Especially since moving over here and since I don't have I don't really have any instruments other than a cheap acoustic guitar. I've taken a lot of I've benefited a lot from exploring different sources of making sound. Like strange synth that works in a strange way, or a weird plugin that generates noise, or just deciding to start a composition from a sample, or deciding to start and I mean that in terms of my own personal solo stuff, when I'm not working for someone else. It's like in the absence of having a full well that's ready to burst, maybe some exploration or curiosity in a weird type of way of and I mean we get this when we switch instruments too. Like you have a certain relationship with the keys. But then, you ever go mess around? And I mean, I haven't committed to this myself, but I'm just trying to make an analogy. Like you go to someone who has an Ableton Push, and they set up that weird mode on the Ableton Push where you can play notes on that grid system. What the hell is this?
Yeah, it's a whole different brain.
It's a whole different brain. But then just because the setup is different, you mess with it.
Yep.
You get over the initial disgust of why am I playing notes on a grid?
Yep.
And then said every guitar player ever. But then once you're like, oh, I can make some sounds with this, and then you come up with an idea that you never would have come up with on the keys, or you load up some strange noise generating plugin and mess around with that, and you get some strange drone, and you're like, yeah, man, I'm gonna make something out of this. So exploring for me, as a substitute for a well that may be ready to burst, sometimes by exploring those. Just novel ways of creating sound or generating sound has helped.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And I've felt the same as well. Especially when producing for friends, where it's where it's a no money situation and I'm doing it because I want to do it. And because we've had conversations and thought about a shared vision, and we've been like, oh, it would be cool if this song you wrote sounded like this, and I could do this, and I could provide this aspect, blah blah blah. But often that conversation happens, we're super excited about it, but by the time the project actually begins, I'm already into 2 other films or 1 other film or something, and I don't have the time that I would like to sit and explore aimlessly and do the things, and follow that, go down that road. But this artist is getting kind of impatient because they're like, yo, we talked about this a few months ago and now I have to put out this record, but we haven't worked on it, or can you spend some time on it and stuff. And that's when usually for me, it's because I'm giving so much to the commercial work in terms of my emotional output and servitude, for the lack of a better word, and not in a negative way, just in a serving the music or serving the purpose kind of way. When I'm coming back to indie projects, I'll often turn to these kind of processes, the way you're talking, I went through a phase where I ran everything through my MS-20, Korg MS-20 synthesizer, the audio, everything.
Just run it through the Korg.
Just because I was bored, and just because I had to work on a couple of songs for a couple of friends, and because I really didn't want to on that day. Just on that day, I didn't want to. But if I didn't work on it that day, it would go another week.
That's the only time you had.
So on that day, to make it fun for myself and to kind of trick my brain into enjoying it and believing in this process, I'll just pick something, like I did with the MS-20 synth. I just passed the drums through it, I passed the bass through it, I passed the vocals through it, I passed everything through it. And it all came back noisy and shitty. But it was really fun. It gave me an aesthetic that felt correct for the song. Maybe it was intuition, maybe it's laziness, whatever the fuck. But it worked out. And then basically my poor friend Viraj had to clean out the noise. So he hated
all that
me
noise
for
that you
a
added,
while.
so he took that out.
No, but it was good. He'll attest to the fact that it sounded good afterward.
No, I'm sure it
did. But you have to trick your brain even through this pandemic, quarantine thing. I've just been super excited about. I think I shared with you the Piano Book, the .uk website. Which is Christian Henson and the Spitfire guys putting out free libraries. I've been super excited about that. We just scored a film an independent film where I used so much of that stuff.
Yeah.
Just because it's inspiring to have new tools.
Yep.
And when you play something, you hear something new, and there's a new way of accessing this feeling or this sound that, you haven't been able to, or it surprises you, so it shows you something new you can do.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. I'll go through. I'm not, this is why I'm not like a mix engineer, or, this is why I just I compose and produce and arrange and stuff, because sometimes my process is just to continually throw paint at the wall.
Yeah.
And there has to be I have a funnel in my head, but often the person on the other side can't see the same funnel or has a different funnel, and that's the issue.
Yeah.
So the thing I'm learning to get better and better at is to actually verbally agree upon that funnel with references and with discussions and with kind of clear demarcations as to, this process and this these tools and this budget and this much time is going to get this far, along that way.
Yeah.
And it would be great if we can surpass that, but let's not expect it as a given, because it's going to be difficult.
Yeah, no, that's also a really important point. So, I mean, speaking of your process and the projects you're working on, is there any the projects off the top of your head that you might want to mention for people to check out that you've worked on in the indie space?
Yeah, interesting. I mean, I forget the stuff I've worked on, to be honest. There's a lot of it that I've just played keys on, like the short round stuff, which everyone should check out. Like even Mally stuff, I don't even remember what keys I played on which songs of hers and when. Really, it was just, now when I hear it's like, wow, this sounds great. Now I don't care what I contributed or didn't contribute to it. It sounds great at the end of it, Kavya stuff, me and Rohan and I have produced, Rohan Ramana and I.
That's Kavya Trehan, right?
Kavya Trehan, yeah. I produced one of Dhruv Vishwanath's singles called Right. Him, me, and Ajay, all three of us kind of co-produced that one. Ajay Jayanti, the violin player. And Rohan Ramana mixed it as well. So yeah, there's a few things recently like that, I guess. I'm sorry to anyone who's listening if I'm missing them out. I don't really, I don't remember.
Hey, I mean, you're
Is there anything that comes to your mind?
Well, I mean, I whatever I can think of, I'm gonna. So this podcast, it shows up on my platforms in its full form, and it's just sort of us talking. But I recently got picked up on Ruckus Avenue Radio, and they only give me an hour slot. So whenever, like this episode will eventually make it into that. I don't know when.
Right.
But when it does, these episodes get split up because they're much longer than an hour, and so then the whatever half of that time is, that's like minus the hour. I'm allowed to just fill it up with any music that I want that is available on iTunes.
Oh, cool!
So I'm gonna just pick some stuff that you're proud of or that I think is awesome that you've done.
For sure, yeah.
Stick it on there.
Absolutely.
So I mean. We've been talking for an hour and a half. I started off talking about the only place that I really knew you from before we started working together was Spud in the Box.
Yeah.
Is there anything that we need to fill in or that we should fill in terms of your history, in terms of getting to where you're at now, that you might want to mention?
Well, nothing specifically for the sake of mentioning it. I would say that if there's anyone listening who is young and wants to know how to kind of, I feel like a lot of people or some people ask me, how do you make it in this business, or how do you learn, how do you know, how are you involved with so many things, or how are you able to successfully finish so many different, I guess, projects or be involved with so many projects. I think one of the philosophies I kind of decided for myself 10 years ago was like when I was in Spud, Ankit, the lead singer of Spud, and I, we both auditioned for Berkeley when they came down to India. And I think he completed his application. I didn't because I was lazy, maybe. and they
would have been lucky to have you.
I mean, no. So the idea was like we both made a decision. I think he got in as well. And I think we both made a decision that, okay, no, this is like, there's something happening here in India. And there's something successful, or there's something that feels right about being in this band and performing live on stage. And, that we shouldn't just give up on for a shiny golden ticket to somewhere.
Yeah.
And
the proverbial carrot at the end of the stick.
Yeah. And I mean, the jury's out on whether that was a wise move or not. But that I did regret it a few years down the line, where I was kind of like, when we didn't do Spud anymore, we paused that for and I started kind of performing with other bands and stuff. But there was some time in between that where I was just kind of stuck, and I was not being able to write, not being able to find much worth in anything I was creating, or not being able to grow at the rate that I would ideally like to grow. So I was definitely at that point regretful of that decision not to go. But that regret or that feeling and being in that moment made me make a decision that was kind of like, okay, cool. I'm in Bombay. I can sit here and look at what isn't available to me and like decide that, okay, those are my limits, so I can figure out how to be successful in other ways or whatever. Or I could just like blindly look at who are my favorite people, like in the world, like who are my heroes, and what are their job descriptions, like what are the things they've achieved in their lifetimes and in their careers. What does a day in their life look like? What is their schedule like? How many things do they cram into a week? And how many different ventures are they a part of? Are they earning from one place? Are they earning from a couple of places? Are they just experts on one topic? Are they dabbling in other things? And most of the people that came up, there was people like Questlove, people like Sting, people like Hans Zimmer, I guess, people like Rahman. You would say cliched big artists, people like Stevie Wonder maybe, but just like people that you would expect. But when you look at, or Pharrell Williams, it's easy to look at these people and think, oh yeah, it's easy for them. They're huge, it's so easy for them to do whatever.
Yeah.
But it's not, if I had $1 million lying around, maybe I wouldn't have the drive to have the careers they have. Maybe I wouldn't want to get off my ass at all. I'd just buy a house somewhere and chill.
No, the drive is super important. My personal output has only improved in the face of crisis. Like I had to move over here because like shit was going down in my personal life. I thought I was quitting music when I moved here. Like when I first moved here, I thought I was like, I'm going to just find some random office job and I'm going to be nearby when my father passes away. That's like what I thought I was doing when I came here. And then he passed away before I actually moved here. And so that made me rethink my whole situation. But even that wasn't the thing that did it. I mean, I got lucky. I met a lot of wonderful people who embraced me and invited me to be part of a community. And partially I was just hanging around and showing up at events. But somehow through that adversity, I found the drive to continue doing stuff, continue making records. And, that wasn't easy. I was broke as hell. And like, I just moved here from the other side of the world and I didn't know anybody. And so, whereas like before that in Toronto, I had quit my job and I was working hard during that time, but there were massive stretches of time, particularly when I had the time to spare and I had a bit of extra money, where I wouldn't be using my time. I wouldn't be doing anything. I would waste a lot of time. And we can talk about how sometimes you do need to chill and sometimes you do need to waste time. And those times are valuable.
I think it depends. It is. I think it depends on your mind, on your frame of mind
and where you're at
during that downtime, because downtime can be really good and very important. But often it turns, at least for me, into like long periods of like stagnation. And long periods of like. That's why I'm saying if I had the money earlier on in life, or if I had gotten successful earlier on in life, I think that I probably would have done that. I would have stagnated quite a lot harder than I was in that moment where I was like, oh my God, whatever. And also I think it's just like, if you look at all of these people and you're like, oh, if these are my heroes and my ideal goal in life, or the ideal version of my life, I can dabble in a bunch of these things. These are all highly successful people at a bunch of really varied things.
Yeah.
One is like film score, one is like, someone like Sting has done like Broadway.
Yeah.
He's made a Christmas record. He's, with loots and shit. He's, he's been in a reggae rock pop band. He's had a wonderful solo career where he's explored so many other types of genres or sounds or whatever. This is not easy.
No.
Like, this is not something that you take for granted, or like, this is not something that you can have a normal life and still achieve.
Correct.
So if you want to achieve something, or if you want to go after these lofty goals or these dreams of yours, you're going to have to sacrifice a fuckload.
Fact.
You're gonna have to like not go out to the party when your friends are calling you out. You're gonna have to not drink every other night. You're gonna have to not watch every TV show that's on and binge watch 20 episodes of it and spend that time. And it's hard. It leads to social delineation. It leads to not being able to get along with a lot of people often because you don't have the same frame of reference as them. About pop culture, about anything, about social like norms, or like how to interact with people. Just generally, you lose out on a lot of these cues because you're at home, or you're at a jam, or at a rehearsal, or on stage, or on a flight, or in a hotel room. The internet has helped because there's a shared vocabulary now that most people have on the internet. So it helps you kind of form your version of that and interact with people.
Yeah. Somehow I was able to know what was going on in Game of Thrones without ever watching it. Because of Facebook.
I succumbed, finally.
I refused.
I left it for a few years, and then I tried, and then I got bored of it and stopped. And then I watched the last season and was disappointed.
Yeah. I knew it was going to be that way. That's why I refused. Anyway, sorry, what you were saying.
Yeah, no, that's what I mean. It's a difficult one. It's not for everybody.
It's very true.
And I think that a thing with my post that I made about the credits and the producers thing as well, there's an element to that in there about we out here like really trying to do this.
We've
like,
sacrificed
for this
immense amount of things that people cannot imagine. And I mean, that's why that's why it resonated.
And the thing is, there's obviously so many other people that are suffering, like way more than us. They don't have the privilege to have the opportunity to sacrifice either.
Correct.
But in my head, I'm a privileged guy. Like I've had a roof over my head all my life. I have 2 parents. They're really great. They've supported me. They've let me drop out of college. They've let me pursue my dreams and do whatever the fuck I want.
Yeah.
And they've left me to myself for most part, and I have nothing but thanks for them for that.
Yeah.
But it would be a huge disservice to them in my head if I went out and wasted that. And I went out and like pandered to what's already up. If I went out and didn't say things that I look at and don't see are right, or I have a massive advantage here. I could sit at home and I can make music that I think is nourishing for the world, as opposed to go out there and sell myself for daily rent, which so many friends of mine have to do.
Yeah.
And I see them contend with it, and it's hard.
Yeah.
And I do contend with it. It's not like I don't work for money, and it's not that I don't have to. I absolutely do have to. But I got a 10-year head start,
Yeah.
And in that 10 years, I made sure I performed as much as I could. I made sure I played in a bunch of bands and identified which ones could teach me a lot of what I don't know.
Yeah.
Because if I want to be 1/20th of all of those people I named as my heroes, I'm going to have to I need experience in all of these fields. I can't go into a field as a noob and expect to be great at it. It's just never going to happen. I don't have that sort of talent. Even if people on the other side might look at me and think, oh, this person's got so much talent or so much whatever hidden
It's hard work and luck.
It's all, yeah, that's all it is. And it's just that I've had a head start.
Yeah.
That's why to someone on the outside, it might look like, oh, this person has a fully formed vocabulary. No, you're just seeing my fully formed vocabulary from 10 years ago or 5 years ago. There's a whole other vocabulary I'm making right now, or 3 that you'll see in five years from now or 10 years from now,
Well, you said
Basically,
a couple of really interesting things that I really relate to. I mean, the first, obviously the sacrifice thing. I mean, like to do this kind of stuff. I mean, in any sort of situation where you choose to go off the beaten path, you're gonna encounter. You might, like, I remember when I first was getting ready to move to Toronto from my hometown to like do the music thing for the first time. And say, I'm moving to Toronto. I'm going to pursue music. And I used to say, oh, like, it's probably going to be the hardest years of my life. I'm probably going to have to sacrifice. And it was one thing to sort of smugly say, that I'm going to sacrifice a lot and it's going to be really hard. But what is interesting is that the actual types of things that I had to sacrifice and the actual hardships that I endured were so different than the types of things that I sort of, intellectually thought I was going to have to sacrifice.
Yeah, that's interesting. What's an example of that? Can you give me a couple of...
The first few records that I made in Toronto, the first couple, and even the singles and stuff that like you can't find now, a lot of that was quite easy. Like the music making was very almost effortless, and there was a lot of flow, and it was like everything else around it that was crushing. Like some of the things you were talking about social isolation, about experiencing like people that I perceived as good friends start to like treat me weird because all of a sudden, they're moving on in life, they're acting more like adults, and I'm like kind of this weird artist guy that's not employed, and like, so like going through that whole phase was really difficult. Going through certainly doing the music and not having any immediate success. I mean, this was also like the music industry has been in a constant process of just breaking down and changing basically since 2000. And so the reward of finishing the music and creating it was really big. But then you put out so many tracks and you're like, we're still like nobody knows what we're doing. And I mean, this is a while back, tracks that you wouldn't even be able to find today. Going through a lot of those things, going through the unemployment. This was all during the financial crash, like post-financial crash. We're talking like 2009, 10, 11, 12, those early years. And definitely dealing with all of the weird social, like the social isolation was very difficult for me. On top of that, of course, like I'm living in Toronto, just as I'm starting to finish my first real full length albums that still exist today, that you can hear. My father gets diagnosed with Alzheimer's. He lives on the other side of the world. I've got to on a drop of a hat, I've got to fly to Calcutta. I got to fly back and forth. Like that stuff was just brutal for me. Like that, falling madly in love with a woman and having my heart broken in the middle of all that, which is mundane, but also like when the first time it happens is kind of crazy. Going through the process of rejection. Like, I when I first moved to Toronto, I worked in an office. I used to put on a shirt and a tie and go into work.
Damn.
And then, a few years after that, I went from working in an office to working in a coffee shop to being just like a starving artist, and watching the way that people would treat me different. I mentioned about my friends, but even like the way women would look at me differently. Like I was like a better candidate for dating when I was in the shirt and tie, and then I was a considerably worse candidate for dating when I was wearing an apron and making a latte. And then I was just like the worst possible candidate for a relationship when I'm a starving artist. And to this day, like I'll be scrolling through my Facebook feed and and these are friends of mine. These are people that I like and I care about, but it's like never date male musicians. And I mean, I understand why they say that, and it's fine. But it reminds me of those times when it was like so much rejection from every, your music is being rejected that you're putting your soul into. Sometimes you're facing rejection from the artists you're working with because they're not cooperating with you. So your parents are on the other side of the world and they don't know what the hell you're doing or take it seriously. And so, yeah, that was really difficult. And the other thing that you said that I kind of wanted to riff off of was you were talking about coming from a privileged background and being lucky. You know, having the circumstances and things, you know, having a 10-year head start. And I mean, I also come from a relatively, you know, a middle class but privileged back, especially by global standards, right? Like 2 parents, all that stuff.
Same here, basically. Yeah.
And for me, that was the motivator. Like we both talked about sacrifices and the amount of things the amount of normal stuff in life that you have to sacrifice just to do a profession like this. So where do you get the courage or the sense of duty or drive to? I've been reading about Hindu mythology, so dharma, to like this is the thing that the right action that I have to do. And for me, it was the fact that I'm lucky. There are people that have way more ability than I will ever have. They won't even get to go near a studio or even the instrument that they would potentially excel at because of their circumstances.
Absolutely.
I was given some basic privilege.
A computer.
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 I was given a computer. I was put in piano lessons. I had 2 of my parents intact, like that you know, that kind of thing. And so it's almost like, no, like if I just like do what every other diaspora kid does and go to medical school or whatever it is, or just like do an engineer, just follow this like blueprint. Like that's fine for anybody else and no judgments, especially sitting at the age that I'm at now. But the fact that I was so lucky almost made it an obligation to do the more difficult thing, to go off the beaten path. Because there are people that could go off the beaten path and excel. If they had my circumstances, they could go off the beaten path and excel even more than I would ever do it. And they won't get that chance. So for those people, it's my responsibility to go give it a shot, and not just a shot, but give it my all. And
absolutely,
so many times I wanted to quit and stop doing what it is that I do, but just through circumstances and also through that drive. So that's the thing. There's the sacrifice, and then there's this like, okay, so is the sacrifice worth it? Do I go down that road? And the reason ultimately that I justified going down that road was I'm lucky and other people don't have that chance. I should do it not just for myself, but for everyone. That
I think it's a combination of that. Like it's definitely on different days it's a different side of that coin. On some days it's on most days, to be honest, it's a lot more selfish than that. It's kind of more like I know that I know what I have at any given moment. You know, I know what I can and can't do given a task. You know, so if I want to do more, and I know how slowly I learn something or how quickly I learn something, you know, it takes me time to internalize stuff and really make it feel natural or really make it feel make it feel authentic and stuff. So the more time I put into something I'm interested in pursuing or interested in something I'm charging money for, you know, in maybe 5 years, 10 years, now, whatever, nobody's going to come and tell me, yo, this is how to do it. This is how you charge. These are all the technical aspects of it. Like, it's not going to be easy for me sitting here in Bombay to learn all the etiquette and all the history of why certain things are done certain ways and why certain things are successful, why certain things, you know, in the West, like you have with recording music, you know, you have such a rich history and tradition that, and you have access to gear, you could just rent gear, you know. Here, that's something that's beginning now, like after a lot of time, after decades of trying to make it happen, loads of people trying to make it happen over time. Now there are a few players in the game. Oh, I could rent that instrument from them. I could do this, do that. You know, we just don't have that infrastructure. So if I'm going to be sitting in Bombay, I can't complain that my career is not high flying if I'm not going the extra mile, you know. It's just like, I guess it's just being a little more real about it. Like I could sit and complain and I could be like, oh, the West has, I was not put in, I was not put in my school. There was no there was one music class, but they didn't teach us much. They definitely helped make me not feel weird by acknowledging the fact that music deserves its own class. So that was good. But within that class, it's not that I learned huge amounts of stuff. Maybe if I had a better teacher towards an Indian tradition who had that rich history when I was young, he or she might have imparted that to me, and I might have gone down that road. I was lucky that I had one teacher who wasn't in school, who used to come to my house, who is this old Parsi gentleman. His name is Rustam Karwa. He's a harmonica player, and he used to whistle for all of the old Bollywood movies. He was the whistle guy.
Oh, wow.
He had a great whistle with the vibrato and stuff.
That's epic.
Yeah, so he kind of I still feel his imprint on my playing and on my outlook towards music. I did fight with him loads as a 6-year-old and as a 7-year-old, but I did learn loads from him. So yeah, I mean that was a tool, right? That was something that I was lucky to have in my life. He was someone I was lucky to have in my life, but I didn't have harmony class. You know what I mean? In school, I didn't have that option of learning what jazz is, of even going deep into rhythm too much. It just didn't exist around me. It might have existed in the music, and I was seeking it out, but the people around me couldn't articulate it, didn't have the vocabulary for it, and I had to learn that vocabulary all on my own. So in order to learn all of that, you have to have some sort of thing that tells you there's more. Keep going. There's more. Keep going. As you can't be the kind of person that gets to a certain point and says, "This is it. I'm happy." I'm gonna sit down and this is all there is. You're not gonna get very far because the cards are stacked against you. That's just the way it is. Being from here, and with the privilege thing, it's there are so many people there are so many more cards that are stacked against them.
Exactly.
Down that ladder, I at least have access to a school. I have access to that guy that came and taught me when I was young. I have access to a small shitty Casio when I was young. They don't have that. They don't have electricity in their house to plug that Casio in. They can't afford the batteries, but they sing way better than I can sing. And they have an instinctual storytelling or an instinctual expression within them that will never be heard because they don't have the means to push through the crap and nobody's going looking for them.
Correct.
So if I can, that's the dharma aspect of it, kind of. That's the obligation where it's man, you've been given so much, don't be a lazy fuck. Don't be,
you said it. You said it.
In the sense that it's okay to, and it's not that I don't waste time. I waste so much time. I've wasted years of my life.
Me too.
It's that I needed to do that for my mental health. I needed to feel that way. I needed to feel that egotistic and kind of within my shame and within my guilt and all of that shit. And then as soon as I learned to let go of some of that, and the more I learned to let go of those things, the more I realized that, man, if you had this much humility about you 20 years ago, you would have gone really far. And you still can if you tap into it. So because loads of people have too much of that humility and don't have any of what you have in terms of circumstances and tools and opportunities. That's and again weirdly tying it back to the producers thing and to the artist thing, the one thing I see around me a lot today is a lot of people getting into music or getting into content as a career for the first time. And that's a good thing because that's something we all wanted when we were growing up. That's something we were all saying that, if we can have the opportunity, if more people can have the opportunity to make this a career, blah, 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 wouldn't that be great? If there were less gatekeepers, wouldn't that be great? Well, we got our wish. It exists. But that also means that a lot more noise exists in the world. And a lot more content for the sake of content exists in the world. And for someone like me, it's a bit difficult telling the real stuff from the crap or the stuff that has true intent and true value, and the stuff that is a bit aimless and that might have potential but has no real point behind it or no real purpose behind it.
Yeah.
And
a lot of my solo music is like that, but I just do that stuff for myself.
well, that's the thing, right? So that's why even my music isn't out there yet. Is because like a lot of people have over the years, my friends mostly or my collaborators keep asking me, "Yo, you've been writing songs for years. Where are they? Put it out. Come on, where is it? Put it out." In my head, it's like there's so much music out there coming out every day. Why would I release something that I didn't truly believe like that I could live with for the rest of my life, and I didn't truly believe means something to me? It's okay if it doesn't mean something to someone else, but ideally, if I'm putting it out at all, why should I put it out and it mean only something to me? It should be a communicative form. It should be something that goes out to the world with open arms and that says, hey, come, engage with me. I'm speaking to you at your level. I'm speaking to you in your language, and I'm making an effort to speak on your terms or on shared terms. I feel like a lot of music that comes out today, at least from the suburban, independent Indian scene, feels to me that it has a lot to do with I want to do music, so I'm putting out a song. I want to make this my career, and I have to put out a song for people to see that I exist and for the numbers to rack up, and I can use those numbers to get the next job or to speak to this label or to speak to Spotify or to speak to this brand and get the next paycheck, and then I have to put out another song to do that, and that's the whole point of it. And that is what I find difficult to contend with. Like I find it difficult to palate and difficult to engage with, because it's like, do you really, is that really what you have to do? Or could you be slogging it out a little more, be a little more uncomfortable with your abilities and your, and your beliefs about the world, and learn. And make your money however you have to make your money to pay your rent, but yeah, it feels a bit egotistic. Maybe it's me just like projecting my own personality onto it, but
there are bits and pieces of what you're saying that I'm trying to make sense of, because like I definitely for years, I've had tons of solo music that I would never release. Now I'm not a songwriter, so it would be like beat oriented or electronic oriented. And tons of stuff I've never released, and thank God I haven't, because when I listen back to that old stuff now, it's kind of like, holy shit, that was quite bad or not great or whatever the case may be. But I do, and then there's this other thing you're talking about like, say, okay, I need to do this so I can talk to Spotify or this label, and I need to get these numbers.
It's like I need to release these many singles in a year. In order for this to happen, I need to release. I need to the turnarounds on my songs need to be this much or this often. So I need to commit to this thing, and it often comes from a place of insecurity and a place of fear, and not from a place of being like self-assured, kind of like, why put something out unless you're confident about it? And here's where my judgmental brain comes into play, where I'm like, are you confident about that?
Well,
when I listen to something.
The flip side of this, in terms of, again, like I take a different attitude with the stuff that when I'm working for other artists and stuff like that. But just the weird dinky stuff that I'm working on, I have found a tremendous amount of release and a tremendous outlet of having these like small dinky compositions or little beatlets or little things that I make, and just kind of like just mixing it quickly and then just putting it up, you know, like, and then making that like, and so that seems in the beginning when you were talking about this particular subject, I was thinking, well, man, shit, I put out lots of silly content. Like,
no, that's not what I mean, though. Because your intent is different. You've got a clear intent there, where you want to do something quickly, and you don't expect anything from it in return.
Yes.
Other than the experience of going through that process and putting it out for whatever judgment may come.
Because there's a Zen aspect of letting it go, and it's also good.
Absolutely.
It's also good practice. It's also good practice for doing things quickly, which sometimes we need to do. And it's also good practice for learning and acquiring those abstract tools, which I will then later use in more involved production. But it is also just, it's a great outlet. And that's something I've only started doing within the last, say, 3 years, which culminated in the beat tape that I released back in June, I think, or May, at the end of May. And I mean, like, it's just a beat tape. It's not anything fancy. But it was really satisfying. It was really satisfying to put that out. And I do encourage people to have these like low stakes things that they're working on, but to not care. Like, and that's the difference. That, I mean, you were talking about, like all this other stuff, like talking to Spotify numbers and labels and that stuff. But just in terms of contributing to the noise out there, I don't think it's too much of a bad thing to contribute to the noise if you're doing it just for the sake of like, this is practice and I like it and it's done and now it's
because you're doing it out of love.
Yeah.
You're doing it from a place of love.
Yeah.
You're doing it from a place of like, I have good intentions and I want to share that with the world. Or like, I'm feeling this thing and I'm going to take a snapshot right now of this feeling, and I'm not going to edit it too much, in the sense that I'm not going to change the feeling. I'm just going to publish the feeling, and the feeling is what it is, and that's what it will be.
And it's like process.
Fantastic.
It's all about process and the exercise of going through that process. And also, like, I mean, like those types of compositions are very much motivated by like just the concept of showing up to work, right? Like, I'm going to show up today and like, maybe I don't have an idea, but I'm just going to turn on Ableton and see what I get, So that's interesting. There's an interesting sort of, I don't know what relationship there or contrast between the sort of more frivolous, sort of superficial.
I think the disconnect comes when the artist is, I guess, pretending, or not pretending, but really believes that they are going the extra mile with their piece of work, or they have this belief that, this is the best thing in the world, which obviously every artist should have. Mm-hmm. Like, when you're releasing something also, you should feel that excited about it. You shouldn't leave it to the point where it's dead and it's like, wow, let's shit this out into the world and never think about it ever again. But there's a, like what you just described felt honest and natural. It didn't feel manipulative, or it didn't feel disingenuous. I think there's a feeling of, and again, it doesn't mean that it's disingenuous, I guess, to want the numbers. All of us want the numbers. All of us want to be heard. Yeah. All of us want the reach and want that engagement from an audience. That's not what I'm saying. It's just that I think people compromise on stuff they don't need to compromise on. They could, and stuff that's free, not stuff that causes that they have to spend a lot of money on and stuff. Just things, effort, like things you could do on your own time. Correct. To make this song better, or to things that you can. It's a lot of it is meditation and just thinking, like living with an idea for a little while after you've like. Maybe this is a personal process thing, because I have so many hats within me. I have to constantly remind myself that, keyboard player Rohan is attached to this idea, or songwriter Rohan is attached to this idea, or singer Rohan is attached to this idea. That's my issue most of the time, where it's like, when I'm working on my own material, the reason it takes so much time is because I go through those phases in my real life based on the work I have incoming and the work I'm engaging with on the commercial side of things. And also what I'm feeling like and what tools I have and blah, blah, blah. All of that informs which phase of that wheel I'm on, which rotation. Is it the producer guy wearing the hat? Is it the songwriter wearing the hat? Yeah. And the product that I'm going to put out as my own thing, all of these people are going to contest to have the best bloody say, The keyboard parts have to be amazing. The lyrics have to be amazing. The production, the arrangement has to be amazing. How could it? If I'm going to listen to all of these guys all the time, how could it? Yep. It's not going to work. Correct. So I have to let them speak. I have to let them express, and then I have to take some time away from it. and then I have to come back and react honestly
Yeah.
and write down what I'm feeling immediately in that moment, where I feel like that part, like where I kind of shrug and feel weird and like when I'm listening back to a song alone also, but this always happens when I'm listening with someone else for the first time. You can always hear, when you listen to a song that you've worked on with someone else for the first time, you automatically know what's up. You automatically can hear 10 mistakes or 10, 12 things that you will change as soon as that person leaves the room, right? And even when you're listening actually alone, they exist. You can hear them. You're just compensating. It's like delay compensation in your DAW almost.
Yeah.
Your brain is saying, I'll fix that, I'll fix that, I'll fix that. But often those things go unfixed and now you're attached because you've worked on it for 2 weeks or for 4 days or 5 days. And you've forgotten that you said you'd fix that, and now you're attached. And now you've built a baseline based on this attached thing, or you've built a thing based on this. And when you listen to it back, you forget that it has structural issues. Kind of like the architecture thing you were talking about at the beginning. And that, I guess, just comes with experience, knowing how you build that house and what kind of house you enjoy living in. So how you're going to build it. I find it very difficult to delineate between the 4 or 5 different people inside my head that all want to have their say and all want to have the biggest piece of the pie in terms of expression.
So it's a lot going on, and it is hard to keep track. But that is all very, very insightful, and I've had a lot of fun, as always, listening to you talk about any number of subjects that we talk about. We've been speaking for
sure,
over...
man. Sorry if I ranted.
No. That's the goal.
I think you've,
that's the goal.
You took my podcast virginity tonight, so
hey,
should be happy.
I'm. What can I say? I hope it was good for you. But I mean, the goal is to get you to rant. I mean, the less that I can talk, the better. I have a pesky. I mean, I talk too much as it is, right? And I have a pesky habit of interrupting people in real life conversations and even in podcasts. When I'm editing these podcasts, some of the interruptions and stuff that I do, it makes me cringe. But one of the motivating reasons behind starting the podcast was to become a better listener. And so when I have somebody on that is willing to just sort of go on about whatever's on their mind, especially when it's interesting and relevant, that's a blessing. So I mean, we've got lots of great stuff, and I'm really glad we got to do this.
For sure, man. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, anytime. I can't wait to see you in person. Maybe we'll bump into each other when you're in Varsova.
Yes, I'm gonna be moving soon. Yeah. Oh God, we should do a hang.
Cool.
I'm setting up a small room. It's gonna be fun.
Oh, nice. Good. And are you meeting people?
Now that I'm finishing up with this film, I'm beginning to get out a little more. I currently still live with some old people, so I'm not going into too many indoor spaces. But outdoors, I'll go for a walk with anyone. Yeah.
Cool. So we'll cut it here, and you can send me this via WeTransfer if that works for you.
Yeah.
The audio.
I shall. Yeah.
Man, it's been great chatting with you. Thanks for this one.
Thank you, man. Yeah, it's been really fun. Interesting one. Let's see what comes out of it.
Peace out, bro.
Cool.
Take
Ciao.
care.